damaged the airplane, and the more bruised you go, I think. But a learning experience. We had a pilot go out in a relatively new experience in a 182. They've been used to flying 172s. After landing, they're unable to steer, towed off the runway. On inspection, there was evidence of a hard landing. The nose gear strut had actually sheared from the holder that keeps it in place, and there was some firewall damage. So there was clearly a hard landing. PIC admits, the aircraft bounced at least once. I can't really remember how many times. And a big one for this one, again, for planning and precision, with the 182 versus the 172, that nose is a lot heavier. And so they weren't used to the amount of elevator force or maybe the attitude they needed. And so they did a little bounce down the runway and ended up causing damage to the aircraft. Got some retraining, and I think they're fine now. Fourth one, 172, departs ISLIP here, 15 left. During climb out, has a partial power loss to a full loss eventually, and returns to land 33 right. Lands without injury or damage, and it turns out the factory engine was recently replaced. This is a tricky one from a planning perspective, because if you know the engine's replaced, I would hope that your planning would involve, let's make sure we have lots of good run-ups and good, good pressures, and that the engine's running as we would expect it before we take off. And I think that's what happened. And then just in the departure phase, there's only so many things you can test on the ground, and you got to actually take it airborne. They had an event, and I think something had come loose during the takeoff. All right, the first accident we looked at last year, as we tend to, if there's a notable event that crosses over our fiscal year as we do this seminar, was in Saratoga. You didn't make the list. Well, when did it happen? We had, I believe it was a Saratoga, departing out of Danbury, going down to South Carolina. The evidence shows through air traffic data that this ended up going into a high altitude environment. The aircraft was not pressurized, and the pilot ended up making choices to go continue flight VFR into IMC conditions. There was no IFR flight plan on the flight. More than marginal VFR, even at low altitude, and I think the goal was, let's see if we can get above something. During communication with air traffic, admits that he had an unreliable attitude indicator, and it ends up with an in-flight breakup near the water, and 3 fatalities. This was also a questionable one in terms of it's an instructor flying a student with the student's girlfriend in the back on a trip to South Carolina. Sort of one of those questionable, how much is instruction and how much is transportation for hire. This pilot had some other issues in the past, and I've heard many FAA managers say that sometimes you do what you can from our perspective, and sometimes the results sort of force somebody out of the system. So unfortunately, 2 other people ended up perishing in that accident.
Ben?
Yes.
In-flight breakup? What was that about?
So basically they got disoriented in flight, couldn't see the horizon, with an unreliable attitude indicator, not reliable gauges, weren't accustomed to flying partial panel. They basically overstressed the aircraft, and the aircraft starts coming apart before it hits the surface. And no parachute. And no, what's the new system with the auto land, and tells air traffic what you're doing? No, none of this. This was an older aircraft, used a lot in flight instruction, but it just, from a planning perspective, again, I'm going to make a flight like that. I want to make sure I have reliable aircraft for instrument flight, or really good VFR conditions if I wasn't going to fly that far. And neither of those existed. And so there weren't many pieces that were able to be recovered initially. It took a while to get the insurance company involved to do the recovery. They did locate the pieces, but there wasn't much left. So again, planning. What planning should have been done prior to that flight. There really wasn't a lot of precision in terms of the maintenance of the aircraft, the record keeping, and or the flying in flight and in the environment. And then ultimately there was an uncoordinated event which caused the disorientation and second one is Dean's finally going to come up and say hi.
Good morning, everyone. One of the challenges that we face, Ben was talking about situational awareness before, and Sal was talking about planning, precision, and coordination. One of the challenges that we face when we're learning to become pilots in the first place is we almost wish that we could follow a planning, precision, coordination recipe. Preheat the oven to 350, prepare the batter, put it in this way, and it's always going to produce a yield of exactly 36 cookies, exactly a certain way, in an exact number of minutes. And any of us that have actually done any real baking know that you have to check to see when it's ready, you have to keep an eye on it, and you never know exactly, every oven is a little bit different. How does that relate to this? Is that when we're flying, even into a familiar airport, even with a familiar airplane, the exact recipe that you follow needs to be altered by your judgment about what inputs are needed in this particular circumstance. And I think that one of the greatest challenges that we face learning how to land an airplane is just looking at when do I want to adjust. So you want to have a recipe, definitely. You want to have a structured procedure, but with experience, you gain how to alter that recipe to tweak it to the circumstances that you're seeing. And with this example that we're looking at here, we've got a pilot who's flying into a familiar field with a familiar airplane and maybe needed to make some adjustments to the recipe to affect the outcome of this situation. So we take a look, we've got this bunker, it's VFR, they're flying into Spadaro, they've got extra airspeed coming into land, and the aircraft ended up floating. And this is a very short field. There's not a lot of extra wiggle room here. A go-around wasn't possible at some point, and they ended up making a runway excursion and ended up, the good news is no injuries to anyone's physical, maybe some ego, but they ended up being in the middle of Montauk Highway. And again, every one of these situations that we hear about, we always have to look at it as a gift from the person that did this. Every one of these situations, whether it ended up in a fatality or no injuries at all, or no damage at all, every one of these is an example of when that person was having their morning cup of coffee or cup of tea, they didn't think that they were going to be involved that day in something like this. So each one of us has to always start the day and say, what silly thing am I going to do today? Or what steps am I going to take in terms of planning, precision, and coordination and maintaining situational awareness that's going to keep me sharp? By the way, the fact that you're here and discussing this shows that you're doing a certain amount of planning, precision, and coordination. By the way, just out of curiosity, how many people have been to every one of the seminars at Mid-Island in 2019? So we're at the last one now. Been to everyone? How many people have been to more than half of them this year? So we have a very dedicated group of people, and you guys are definitely we're talking to the right people. We got to get more people to come to these seminars so that we can continue to have this. Because the fact that you're making the effort to be here is also helping your planning, precision, and coordination as well. So what are some things that a pilot can do to make better decisions in the traffic pattern? Well, planning how you're going to enter the pattern and seeing, am I floating, where's my decision point where I'm going to add power and go around, right?
Yeah.
Where's the spot where you're going to choose to land, and how much further past that spot are you going to allow the aircraft to go?
And in this case as well, what target are you going to have for your airspeed? What kind of margin are you going to allow? So let's say the target is 65 knots. Are you going to let it get to 70? Or are you going to try to, hey, as soon as I see it get to 67, I'm going to make sure I get it back down.
Exactly. And by the way, we have the other side of it, which is if you've got gusty wind conditions, it may be that you need to carry a little bit of extra airspeed. I feel sometimes like when we're teaching this stuff, there's 30 days, has September, April, June, like there's all these rules, and then there's February, and then there's leap years. So when we land, it's like we've got all these rules, and then some of those rules need to be adjusted to have precision. Are you planning for a short runway? There's another thing that is also very insidious, which is complacency. You've got your planning, you've got your precision, your coordination, your situational awareness, and then because it's a familiar airplane, because it's a familiar airport, you're chit-chatting with the person next to you, talking about your Christmas shopping and what you're going to get your wife and all this stuff, and meanwhile you're not exactly, you're getting a little bit complacent. And the whole business of having a sterile cockpit at a point in your flight and saying, okay, now I'm devoting 100% of my thought to the activity at hand, that also is important. Are you being coordinated? Again, on a short field, you have not a lot of time. The other thing is if you are going to do a go-around, remember, you've probably got all those flaps in there. What is the nose going to want to do when you add that power? So you want to anticipate in advance what's going to happen, and you're ready for it. Okay.
All right, our next one is a 172. Starts his day nice and early, 5 o'clock in the morning, and ends up departing out of Republic at 7, going up to Niagara.
Oh, okay.
So that's a relatively long flight on its own. It's probably about as much as I would want to do in a day from needing to be mentally aware and alert.
Are you a cop?
Does take a nap somewhere along the way, gets a little nap in the nap room for about an hour, and decides to come back at 5 o'clock local back here to Republic. Decides to use LaGuardia as a filed alternate. Makes 4 attempts to land at Republic. Did at some point request a larger airport, longer runway. I think he was hoping that the lights as well would make it easier to see the runway. And ends up making 2 attempts at Kennedy. And on the 3rd attempt, has complete fuel exhaustion. So we're going to watch a video on this one.
More on that breaking news we're following on Long Island. A small plane makes an emergency landing just after 10 o'clock tonight, hitting power lines right in front of a home in Valley Stream. CBS News' Rena Roy is there live with more on what's happening now. Rena.
And Jessica, if you take a look right behind us, you can see that plane is still here, completely flipped upside down, its nose into a front lawn here on Clarendon Drive, just several miles away from JFK Airport. And as you can see, the plane has taken down a utility pole, power lines falling with it. A neighbor tells us many homes in the surrounding area are now without power. And we have just learned from the FAA that 3 people were on board when this came down at around 10:15 tonight. So far, no word yet on any conditions. Neighbors here that we've been speaking with have been watching in shock after hearing a loud noise, then coming outside and seeing this.
And that loud noise was actually the aircraft. Well, the power lines may have made a noise. The first noise that the neighborhood would have heard was when that aircraft actually hit the church across the street. Then they basically careened off of the, sort of glanced off the church enough to do damage, and ended up in that wire mess. There's also another little video with some more law enforcement officials who give us some information about whether we see some flight traffic.
This map shows how the plane circled the area. Police say they were redirected to Kennedy Airport and missed the runway there twice.
As they came around, they ran out of fuel. They caught the rooftop of the church. The wires prevented the plane from actually striking the ground. It hung it up about 1 foot from hitting the ground.
Resulting in about 200 homes without power, but the houses and the residents are all okay.
So, a couple photos here. He wasn't exaggerating. About an inch or so from the tip of the spinner or the wheel to the ground, to the sidewalk there. You can see, maybe it's hard to see, I got the laser here. This section right here is a bunch of wire actually had torn through I think that's the stabilizer there, the elevator. Literally caught the 3-wire on that wheel, right? And so finally in the light of day, when they get it down off of the wires, and that fuselage is toast. Of course, this, you could imagine, brought a lot of emergency response vehicles. Now, somebody was blessed, and nobody got hurt. We had one minor injury, which maybe was some broken finger. The fact that more did not happen is a miracle. It certainly wasn't through proper planning or precision or coordination. Now, the good thing, let's talk a little bit here. So, planning wise. Again, maybe the team, if you know that you're going to have a couple long flights, you may want to shift things. Maybe we delay, especially in a weather event like we had that day, which was very similar to a day like it is outside. If you know the weather's going to be low IFR, maybe we delay our return. I don't know, and the gentleman has actually left the country, back to his home country, so we don't know for sure, what the external pressures might have been from his friends. It's unclear on what kind of operation was happening here, but he did rent the airplane, so he's responsible as the PIC and operator in that case. He does call flight service. He's a relatively new instrument pilot at this point. Does call flight service to get a briefing, talk about the weather. Of course, flight service, as they would do in a situation like this, VFR flight, not recommended. Well, that's great, I'm going IFR. Okay. What equipment are you filing? Slant golf. Okay, you have GPS on board the aircraft? No. I have GPS on my iPad. That's not slant golf. So I think this ended up being either slant uniform or slant alpha, so it wasn't a particularly modern aircraft in terms of avionics. When we talk about planning, we talk about weather, obviously, and coming back to this area was forecast to be low IFR for the entire evening. And it wasn't going to get any better until the next morning. Precision. I think the only thing I can talk about precision on this particular event is, if you look at that spaghetti map here, it's unclear from the data we have whether the pilot was able to maintain a good track on the localizer and glide slope on these multiple attempts back into Republic initially. I know that a couple of approaches he broke off a little early, but it could have been more due to how he was perceiving the glide slope on his instrumentation. The other thing that happened, which is just worthy of note, we did have a business jet, I forget the type exactly, but a jet come into Republic during this sequence of events, and they reported, when asked by the tower, can you give me a pyro? They said, well, we broke out maybe 100 above minimums. That particular aircraft was equipped with enhanced vision system. The enhanced vision system allows, through basically forward-looking, either infrared or depending on the technology, but basically through a camera on the front of the aircraft, allows you to use the representation in the cockpit as long as you can see the runway environment, the runway edge lights, the numbers, the touchdown zones. You can see that information presented on the HUD in the aircraft. It's essentially as if you could see it with the naked eye. So they have an authorization to use that equipment. So when they reported 100 above minimums, in reality, the visual conditions might have been you wouldn't have seen the runway at all. But they were authorized to do that. There's nothing in air traffic language that requires clarification. So if you're in a situation like that, and you hear of a business jet especially, it's mostly going to be on the commercial aircraft, making a report like that, you may want to ask on the frequency, hey, was that a visual observation or do you have enhanced equipment? And they would hopefully tell you, oh, okay, so I might not see the runway. And you certainly aren't going to see it 3 times in a row if the weather is that bad. Now, he does make a good decision. Let's go try a different airport. And when I talk about the filing for LaGuardia as an alternate, and he does say that on the radio, like, LaGuardia is my alternate, but I think air traffic is the one to kind of offer Kennedy. Remember that if you're going to have an IFR flight plan, you have to have an alternate if the weather is going to be below, it's not going to be at least 2,000 foot ceiling, 3 miles of visibility from 1 hour prior to 1 hour after your estimated time of arrival, the 1-2-3 rule. And then in order to use an airport, as a file alternate, the weather at that airport has to be forecasted to be at least 600 feet and 2 miles for precision, or 800 feet at 2 miles for non-precision. And you have to check, because it might be not authorized to be used as an alternative file. You want to double check. So in this case, there was no way that it was going to be 602 at LaGuardia forecast. So the forecasted, or the required legal minimum, legal alternate might have been back to Niagara or up to Stewart. Doesn't mean you can't fly somewhere else in between based on communication techniques, what's available from aircraft. Anything else you want to add to that one, Dean? Or questions?
Question. If he's coming from Niagara, why is he approaching from the south? The tower directed him?
Why is he approaching from the south? Yeah, I think that's the arrival.
That long, straight green line.
I think his arrival started, over. That's a good question. I'm not sure, actually. But I think.
Did everybody hear the question?
Yeah, so the question was, why, if he's coming from Niagara, which is way north, why does he end up coming from the south in this instance? And I think that's just the routing that he got, and I think there might have been some weather on the west side as well that he might have tried to circumnavigate. Yep. He's going to show you the video, and then just at the beginning of this video. You check that on the screen?
This map shows how the plane circled the area. Police say they were redirected to Kennedy Airport and...
So, coming over through Jersey.
By the way, what would have been a better place for him to go?
Anywhere else?
East.
Thanks. Good question. Anything else you want? I'll bring it back. Anything else you want to offer, Dean?
Yeah, it looks like the guy bounced up the church, landed in the wires, nobody got hurt. So that day an angel got his wings, somewhere.
All right, number 4 is now Dean.
Okay, so anybody in here a rotary pilot? Experts in rotary aerodynamics? Okay, so I'm just giving as a disclaimer in advance about my knowledge of rotary aerodynamics. But sometimes we as pilots also have to make very quick decisions, very quick reaction. We talked before about a go-around. 3 reasons for a go-around. You don't like the way the landing looks. There's an obstruction on the runway. You have to make a very, very quick decision. You discover that you're too high, too low, just right. You've got to make a quick decision. You see a gust that's knocking you in a particular way, and you've got to make a quick decision about how to implement your coordination and precision. And there's no circumstance that really demands that precision at all times and that vigilance at all times to make control inputs than when you're in a helicopter. And I don't know if you've ever heard the joke about that a helicopter is a bucket of bolts that's trying to tear itself apart. In this circumstance, we've got a pilot. How many people are familiar with the main rotor versus the tail rotor in a helicopter? So what's the purpose of the tail rotor? Anti-torque. Because if we didn't have the tail rotor, we'd be whipping around in the opposite direction according to, Newton's third law? So the anti-torque rotor is also usually moving, maybe at a ratio of 9:1 to the main rotor in terms of revolutions per minute. And so it's pretty important that you don't end up in a circumstance where suddenly there's a wind shift, and then you've got to make with your anti-torque pedals, like the rudder pedals in the airplane, but the anti-torque pedals, you're adjusting the pitch of the rotor blade on the tail rotor, and you got to make very fine adjustments, especially in rapidly changing conditions. And that's what this whole circumstance is about: precision and coordination in that circumstance. So we've got a flight that's making a relatively routine repositioning. The whole flight, if it had gone correctly, would have been how long? 10 minutes?
No. It's repositioning from the fuel farm to the passenger tank. So 37 seconds.
Yeah, it would have been a very quick little flight. We wouldn't even be talking about it. So wind gust is 8 knots, gusting to 22. Also, we know that winds also around fences, around buildings, around pilings, can also make the wind act in squirrely ways. And here's a quick discussion about the event.
Just incredible to Vera, isn't it? Particularly when you see that plane come down into the Hudson River, that helicopter which was spiraling out of control. This vision caught by a passerby in New York, saw the helicopter go into the water, and from there, emergency services acted quickly. The pilot was the only person aboard. He got out of the fuselage and actually stood as it bobbed upside down in that murky water. He was rescued by a passing boat, and then the emergency services got the helicopter to shore where they tied it up. Just incredible.
Just incredible that the best copy of a news clip that I could get was actually shown in Sydney. They had clips up here, but they were embedded with all sorts of kooky stuff that went way, off the charts with information that we didn't need. So, but you can see how quickly 1 minute at the very, very beginning, the pilot is in complete control, and then within an instant, something happens. And anybody in here ever heard of loss of tail rotor effectiveness as a concept? So sometimes you'll even hear the phrase settling with power. And a lot of it has to do with rapidly changing conditions that require very precise adjustments for the cyclic and very precise adjustments for the anti-torque pedals. And that's not what happened in this circumstance. Loss of tail rotor effectiveness is unanticipated right yaw in helicopters. It's a critical low-speed aerodynamic flight characteristic which results in an uncommanded rapid yaw rate which does not subside on its own accord, and if not corrected, can result in possibly loss of the aircraft, loss of life.
And just right yaw, depending on which way the anti-torque pedal is installed, and if it's an American manufacturer or European manufacturer, they like to do things differently.
So I'm just going to quickly show you a couple of quick snapshots of the different types of circumstances. Loss of tail rotor effectiveness can happen for a variety of reasons depending on where the sudden shift in wind is coming from. So if we have the wind coming from that corner there, it looks like between 10 and 11 o'clock, it can affect the vortices coming off of the rotors, main rotor and the tail rotor, and it causes what's called main rotor disc vortex interference. So it's kind of like a little bit of a, yes, exactly, wake turbulence like what we talked about. Next slide. We also have something called weathercock stability, which has to do with the fact that the whole helicopter is designed in a particular aerodynamic shape, and if we have wind shifting back and forth at different positions from the tail, it can force the helicopter to rapidly be kind of unstable in the way that it's facing. And the third one is where the wind is coming from the left side, and again shifting back and forth down to the 8 o'clock position, and causing what's called tail rotor vortex ring state. And there's a discussion on this. And these are straight out of the standard training that everybody gets, and from the time that they read the helicopter flying handbook and through all of their training. But when it actually happens, you have to make a very rapid set of control inputs. There's no room for complacency in this circumstance. It's something that I want. So helicopters always got to be vigilant, always got to be current, and if you're not doing it on a regular basis, it's something where you really want to go up for recurrent training with an instructor. If there are things that you haven't run into in a while, you have to almost say, I haven't really worked on my, go up with like a personal trainer and say, I haven't done loss of tail rotor effectiveness in a while, or I haven't done auto rotations, with 180 degrees, with landing without power. I haven't done it in a while. I want to practice that and keep those skills sharp. Remember, in a helicopter, because things happen so quickly, your margin of safety is much smaller than, we have a lot of training aircraft, and some of the aircraft that we fly, it almost takes a mistake held in place for a while for it to turn into something bad, where there's a much smaller window of